Hello and welcome to Checking the Vitals, a podcast powered by SpecialtyCare.
My name's Todd Schlosser, and joining me today are Landon, Paige, and Liam. They are straight out of our Intraoperative Neuromonitoring new hire class, or as they like to call themselves, Surgical Neurophysiologists 1, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So let me ask you guys, just a little bit about where you guys came from and how you ended up in our new hire program. So did you all have like bachelors in a scientific field? Like where did you guys start out, like in college?
Yeah, so my undergrad was biomedical engineering, which falls in line pretty well with this field. But for the most part, you don't necessarily have to be like in engineering or like it could be very broad for your science degree to actually like apply. If that makes sense. That
does make sense.
Yeah.
So, Paige, were you the same, and Liam, were you the same?
No, I had a bachelor's in neuroscience.
Okay.
So this was pretty close to what my undergraduate studies encompassed.
So, and Liam, what was yours in?
So I also had a bachelor's in behavioral neuroscience.
Oh, okay, awesome. So it's similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and they're still in the scientific realm. It wasn't like you had an English degree and then you're like, oh, I want to be a neurophysiologist.
Yeah.
That would be a big swing. So did you apply or were you recruited?
I think we all applied.
Okay.
At least for this cohort, everyone applied.
Yeah, and the cohort.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's what we refer to as.
Is that like a company thing, or did you guys just start using Roman terminology?
Kind of what Julie had labeled us as, the cohort.
Okay.
All 5 of us.
Yeah. Well, that's how they also like run the program, is they recruit people in waves.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they just like to use that terminology. So
fair enough.
It works.
So let me ask, when you guys were getting your science degrees or neurophysiology degrees, it sounds like, or sort of heading that way, was the idea to go into med school and become like doctors or surgeons, or was it to take a different path like this one?
I'll be honest, I didn't really know too much what I wanted to do once I graduated with my bachelor's degree. The idea was to go to medical school. I did my prerequisites for medical school, but I hadn't really gotten around to taking the MCAT, which is the entrance exam for medical school. And somehow the rabbit hole led me to neuromonitoring. I had a friend who was in it, and he introduced me to it, and it was in medicine, and it also had a lot to do with my undergraduate degree, so it seemed like a perfect fit.
Yeah, the Venn diagram of your undergraduate and where you are now seems to cross over. It's not quite a perfect circle, but yeah.
Yeah.
So Liam and Landon, are you pretty much the same?
Fairly similar, yeah.
Were you just out there Googling away, trying to find out what you wanted to do?
Not exactly.
Post-college?
I knew like I had certain directions, and I like started some places. Like I originally thought I wanted to do like chiropractic work, and then considered maybe like DO school, but then neither of those really seemed to fit well, especially after I was able to shadow those positions and kind of see the outcomes. And then it was someone that influenced me, that showed me this job, and that's kind of why I decided to go this route right when I was graduating.
So when you graduated and you started searching for that next step, when you decided you wanted to do the intraoperative neuromonitoring track, did you decide that because you found SpecialtyCare, or did you decide that first and then went searching for places that did that?
I think it started with the search of what is IONM.
Sure.
I had a friend in it, and he gave me a brief description about it, and I didn't.
Is this friend doing that job now?
He is.
Okay.
Not with SpecialtyCare.
Fair enough.
That's later on in the discussion. But it was hard to find information on IONM, to be honest. Googling it, I think the only thing I really came across was one website. I can't remember who the guy was. He works for SpecialtyCare, though.
Joe Hartman.
Joe Hartman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I came across Joe Hartman's website, and that's where I really learned about IONM, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I could do this. So.
Yeah, my experience came from, I actually had a friend of mine who went through a previous cohort, and most of my information was coming from him because, like Paige was saying, there's not a lot out there right now.
That's one of the reasons we do things like this, is to help get that information out there, because I talk to a lot of people who are graduating with science type degrees that have no idea that IONM or perfusion or things like that are even an option. They just they have in their head that they have to go to medical school. I know a lot of them do end up want to be doctors, so they go into that and want to be like a general practitioner or whatever. So you then changed your mind when you learned about IONM.
When I got my degree, I thought I was only going to be able to go in the research field, so I did that for about a year.
Oh, in research?
Yeah, I was in research. I was working in the Philadelphia area. It wasn't my thing. So then my friend told me about this, and he's like, you're a people person, so
why not deal with saving people?
Yeah, instead of dealing with mice all the time.
I can see what that. It doesn't sound very fun to me at all. But yeah, so what? Let me see. So why did you choose to start with specialty care? Like, what was it that led you to specialty care and then applying to go through our training program?
So SpecialtyCare is one of the very few companies that actually has a formal training program, and it was hard to find other companies that even had some sort of training. I did come across a couple companies. They had training, but it wasn't formal. It was more of just like, hey, we'll put you with this preceptor, or this other person, we'll throw you in the OR, and you just kind of copy what they're doing. SpecialtyCare is pretty much a very formal training program. We had the didactic portion, and we've also been in the OR about 10 or 11 times up to this point.
And is that the live OR, not the sim OR that we're in right now?
We do practice in the sim OR.
Yes.
That was closer towards the beginning of our training here in Nashville. But we also had twice a week we were in the actual OR, so doing cases alongside another SN, which is very helpful.
And SN stands for?
Surgical Neurophysiologist.
Excellent. One.
That's
what you guys are.
Well,
we are.
Yeah. They probably aren't ones anymore.
They're probably 2 or 3.
Yeah, awesome. So you're getting the sort of the book knowledge in the classrooms that we have here, and then you're actually getting the hands-on in our sim OR that we're in right now and the actual live OR.
Yeah.
So did you choose to come to specialty care because we offered that sort of comprehensive approach to training for intraoperative neuromonitoring?
Yeah, so SpecialtyCare, like I said, they're the formal training program.
Similar answer. I just heard how this was, if you're going to do IONM, you're going to get the best training through SpecialtyCare.
Yeah. And
like now through these past 2 months, I can see why people say that. Like it's intense, but it really prepares you.
That sort of leads into my next question. So before you actually went into doing the shadowing in an actual OR, like what week of the training was that in?
So that was week 3.
So you
went to the actual OR.
So you had 3 weeks to sort of prep in the sim OR.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Oh, okay. So it was in week 3. I gotcha. Yeah. So you had 2 weeks to prepare in the sim OR and did the classroom, the book stuff. When you went in for the first time, was it you weren't really going to be the ones that were in charge of the monitoring, but did you feel prepared and you sort of understood what was going on? And
yeah, so first 2 weeks, it was basically a crash course of making sure we understand the basics, the foundational knowledge, and also working in the sim OR, placing electrodes. And then once we got into the actual OR, we had a general idea of how it was going to be, and we were with a preceptor, and we essentially just watched them kind of how they were doing our first week, and then gradually we started jumping in and getting more hands-on, and now we're at week 8, and so we're pretty much able to do some of the cases on our own with a preceptor by our side, of course.
So I'd imagine that hands-on portion, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is the first time you go into an actual OR, you're just watching them sort of do everything, and then gradually you start to take over more responsibilities and they start to monitor more and more.
It speeds up pretty quickly though. Like
I'm sure that's true. You only have 2 months, right?
Yeah, they encourage us to, like, after your first 1 or 2 times in the OR, they're like, all right, now you're starting to place these, or you're starting to tell me what's on this screen.
Right.
And so you very quickly start to, get on these responsibilities and kind of.
So do you feel like you were prepared for that, having had this 8 weeks of training?
Yeah, I think so.
For sure. Absolutely.
Maybe I should ask you in like 3 weeks. But I mean, you guys seem to know, you guys seem very comfortable, at least with that. So let me ask you, now that we sort of talked about where you're going and what you've been through, can I ask what was the interview process like with SpecialtyCare? So when you, I guess, first applied, did you apply online?
I applied online,
Did you guys?
Yeah.
So I actually got a phone call first.
Oh, yeah?
So
you like requested information and we gave you a phone call? Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so once we called you or you applied online, did you get then a call from like a recruiter and they just set up interviews? What was the interview process like?
Landon, you want to go for it?
Sure. Yeah, they started, with just like basic kind of background questions on us,
Right.
and see kind of who we were. And afterwards, they had us do a personality test and just a few like assessments online, just to see if we really kind of fit what this job entails.
Sure.
Afterwards,
It was the director interview. So
Yeah.
It was a phone screening with the director.
Okay.
yeah, after the
And
assessments.
did you guys all, who was that?
Julie Trott.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's who actually ended up training you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get her on the podcast for a while. I think we're gonna work that out. So she called you. She made sure you guys were good fits for the program. And then did she extend the offer to you then, or was there more interviews after that?
Yeah.
So we had an in-person interview
Okay.
where we flew down here to Nashville.
Yeah.
And then basically for a couple hours we talked to them.
It was a panel interview. So we had, at least for my interview, it was 3 people and then me. And just your generic interview. It was pretty intense, but yeah.
But you made it through?
I apparently so. I'm here.
So what are some of the core requirements to, I guess, be even considered for an IONM position with really a hospital where you guys are going to be placed? Because that's really what matters.
So for specialty care, it's a requirement to have a bachelor's degree in some kind of scientific field.
Right.
But as far as what that scientific field is, they kind of leave that open. I haven't gotten to meet anybody. We have been told, there's chiropractors here, there's dentists who went through this program, things like that. So just so you have like a core foundation of.
I'd imagine there are a lot of people who have your specific type of degrees, just because there's a lot of overlap in that. From dentistry to IONM, I'm sure there's a lot of transferable knowledge, but less so than what you guys came in with. Were there people with different types of degrees in your cohort?
Yeah, we have one guy, the other Landon. He has a master's degree in biomedical science, I think.
Okay.
Is what it is. Yeah.
And then Vince, he did biochemistry.
Yeah. So everybody has a little bit different background.
So I know, Liam, you mentioned that you thought your track was to be a doctor of some sorts in the research field.
I was in research. I wasn't sure like how far I was going to project with it.
Yeah.
I thought, just after I got out of school, this was something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Turned out not to be, but.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who work here who started out, and if you go to their LinkedIn's, it's like they went through, they got a bachelor's in a science of some sort and did research for 1 or 2 years and then started perfusion or started IONM and then took that track. Because like you were saying, research isn't a great thing for people who love to be around people. So I've talked to a lot of people who have similar stories as sort of what yours is.
Not just the people aspect, but this kind of career field, it's a good and bad thing where it's a fluid kind of thing. So the schedule isn't, a straight 9 to 5.
Yeah.
That actually is appealing to me. Going in 9 to 5 every day is kind of a little bit boring to me. The change of it is actually really appealing. So we could have early morning cases that go all the way to night, or we can have just cases in the afternoon, cases in the morning. That actually is appealing to me. Like
The variability of it.
yeah,
all.
thank you. I couldn't think of that word.
Yeah, I like that a lot in my life as well, just because I don't want to get stagnant or I get bored easily, I guess.
Me too.
And I sort of love what I do, and I'm sure you guys love what you do, but that sort of variance helps keep things light and sort of fresh, if that makes sense. So I enjoy that quite a bit as well. So did some of you, or any people in your cohort, like considering going into med school and becoming an actual like general practicing doctor or surgeon themselves, and then they decided to switch and do this?
I'd say the closest was probably the other Landon. Right?
Yeah.
The other
One
Landon?
of our
Yeah.
members did.
He took the MCAT, I think,
He
at some
did,
point.
and I think he decided to take a job that would pay you to train instead of paying for medical school.
Yeah, because medical school can be very expensive. I've talked to people who have come through our training classes, and one of the reasons they decided to do that, IONM or perfusion, was because they didn't want to pay the $150,000, $200,000 in medical school when they could just go through a training program and start making.
Yeah. Well, it's not even the money too; it's the time.
Yeah.
It's like, is this how I want to spend? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
4 or 5 years.
And then residency and all that stuff. And I'm not mad at that. I'm very glad the doctors I go see have been through that. But I don't know if I'd want to make that time commitment either.
Yeah.
So can I ask what the basic sort of layout of the training program was. So the first 2 weeks were all classroom?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then what was the classroom training like? Was it literally study this section, we're going to go through this section and talk about it, or is it handled like by case type, or?
We were in the classroom 9 to 5 first 2 weeks, and Julie was the one that led the lectures, essentially. So each lecture was foundational knowledge of spinal cord pathways and sensory pathways, and we had different sections for each, and we would go over it all. And then the at-home studying would be like modules online, just reiterating the information that we had just learned. And then the second week we were in the simulation OR, practicing the other things that we're going to need to learn before we get into the OR. So,
yeah.
And then from the remaining 6 weeks was kind of just a mix of both. Some classroom as well as some time in the OR.
So that last 6 weeks where it was some classroom, some time in the OR, is it you're really doing the bulk of your learning in the actual OR, and then you're using the classroom time to kind of hone in on what you saw in the OR, or are you learning new things as that?
First 2 weeks was like the crash course in the fundamentals, and then once we got into the classroom of the last 6 weeks, we had a lot of, I think they were called workshops, where we would have other people within the company, like Brian Willent, he's the VP of quality. He came in and gave us a presentation on just quality in IONM and our data and how we can get better data, and just a couple of different people have come in during our classroom time in those 6 weeks, and it also focused more on the actual surgeries as well. So we learned, I guess, basically the surgeries.
Yeah, we'll have also like previous like surgeries that we've been in. We'll go over those in this class time too, where we'll just pick a case that we might have thought of was interesting, or something maybe that we didn't expect that happened, and we might go over in class, say like, oh, well, what went wrong, or why did this happen instead of this?
Sure.
And so
what went well, what didn't go great?
Yeah, it's
how
a
can we
good
do
time
better?
to dissect things and like really get that deep understanding that is kind of required to give the best patient care we can.
Yeah, and another point to that is we focused a lot on the literature, so like published papers, especially from some of our SpecialtyCare coworkers who published a lot. We read that, so we're better informed during surgeries.
Yeah. So that's one thing. So it's not just that they're just telling us these things. They have us read the literature, understand it for ourselves. So that way, when we consult with the surgeon about what goes on, we can talk to them about these things. We can reference them. Yeah. So that way, we're not they're not thinking we're just making stuff up.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want anyone thinking that, especially not in an OR type setting. Yeah, you don't want a surgeon being like, "I don't believe you." That's never going to be a good thing. Yeah. So when people ask you what you do, and people who don't work in the medical field, like friends or family, what is it that you so it's a hard job to quantify, and I wondered how you guys explained that to people. So like loved ones, or how do you tell them what you do?
Landon, you got this one.
I mean, we have to do it quite often, just because with every patient we meet, we have to talk to them before their surgery and explain kind of what we're there for. I guess plainly, we're there to monitor the nervous system. We do that primarily by recording signals that we stimulate from the wrists and ankles. They're recorded at the scalp, and with that information, we can give that to the surgeon in real time. That way he can make decisions or see what he's doing on his side.
So you are there to sort of safeguard them against further injury. Is that a fair way to say that?
Yeah, advocating for the patient.
Yeah.
We let the surgeon know of things that he can't see as far as goes integrity of the pathway. How are these things conducting? Are they?
We're kind of like a voice for the patient, because they obviously can't speak or
they don't want to be awake during this time.
They
can't
really want
say
to.
like, oh, I can't feel my fingers anymore. Like we do that.
But you can actually see that they would have lost feeling in their hands, or can you get that specific with it?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, we do different modalities. So SSEPs give us information about the sensory pathways. So if we lose SSEP amplitudes, that gives us a good indication that, oh gosh, this patient is probably losing sensation.
Also with like motors too, like we can tell whether the patient will be able to move something when they wake up, or at least be able to get a direction to point in. Like maybe not know for sure, but like have like a reference as to know like maybe what happened, or like if something went wrong, there's a chance for that.
So like preventing things like paralysis, and that can be like maybe not the negativest of outcomes, but a negative outcome of surgery.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We reduce the likelihood of negative outcomes post-operative, definitely.
And that's good for both the patient but also the hospital as well, for any kind of
surgeons too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a win-win.
Yeah, I would say so. So a lot of patients on the patient side, I didn't know what intraoperative neuromonitoring was until I started working here. I had no idea. So is it something that you would sell, like if you had a friend or a family going into surgery, would you tell them to ask for,
absolutely, to
have that sort of, not that you guys should be the ones doing it clearly, but just to make sure that they have someone there for it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it makes sense for spinal surgeries, but I've seen it used in other types of surgeries as well that I wouldn't necessarily have thought to see. But those sort of, I hate to say mistakes, but mistakes can happen in all different kinds of surgeries.
Yeah. I mean, your nervous system runs throughout your body.
Yeah, it's
There's
pervasive. It's all there.
That we could be in any of those. So I mean, definitely would want one in my surgery if I was going under.
Yeah, I would too, but I know more about it because of where we work than I would say the layman does. So let me ask each of you this sort of final question. If you could talk to someone who was in your position before you started working for SpecialtyCare, how would you sort of, like what advice would you give them into looking for this type of position? Like, what did you do to find it? Like, what made you decide to get into it? Does that make sense? So, like, what advice would you give yourself, 6 months ago or whenever you graduated? Someone who is graduating with a science and considering medical or IONM or perfusion or something like that.
Yeah, I guess you have to evaluate, if you are wanting to go medical, what your options are. Like, everyone always kind of thinks of doctor. Yeah. Also nurse. But if you feel like you want to do something medical, but maybe not quite those avenues, that there are other options, and that's what I think people don't see. But like, that's kind of where I was for a while when I was unsure, because I felt like I was drawn this way, but just couldn't find the fit. And then this kind of like popped up, and I was like, oh, this seems a little bit more natural for me. So just being able to, I don't know, more of this stuff that helps get the word out is really helpful, because like Paige said earlier, it's kind of difficult to find a lot of information for intraoperative monitoring. So doing more things like this is going to be, useful.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to have that scientific background. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a neuroscience degree, but I found it's very helpful to actually be interested in science and in research, especially when we started reading all of the articles and the publications. It's like, it really is interesting to see how new of a field IONM is, and neuroscience, and just everything that we're doing is very new and developing constantly. And just having an interest in science and research and even healthcare is definitely helpful. I would say just figure out if healthcare is something you want to go into, and if you enjoy learning new things constantly, it's definitely a plus when you're coming into this field.
Absolutely. I feel like learning new things constantly is something you're going to have to do in any job anyway.
Yeah. Especially this one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure more so in this one, because as technology moves forward. And IONM is pretty young in the surgery space because of, it's 100% digital technology. So it's not like perfusion that started in the 30s, You can't do that with, electrodes. But
yeah, so similar to what Paige was saying, like, keep an open mind. You're going to be learning a lot here. You have to be able to absorb the information, so don't just shut anything out.
Just sort of welcome it all.
Yeah, kind of just go with it sometimes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we'll end it there. Thank you guys so much, Landon, Paige, Liam, for letting me steal you guys for 30 minutes or so.